to navigate the crazy meme coin market too. Loaded up for discussion today. We have Bitcoin breaking 91K, up 3%. Went as high as 93K yesterday. ETH is, as usual, floundering, just up 1% at around 3.2K, and Solana is up 6% to almost $220. Pepe listing with Robinhood and was added to the roadmap for Coinbase yesterday. And the big news also was WIF was added to the Coinbase roadmap too, whilst Peanut continued its absolute surge upwards, went past $2 billion. And finally, in another piece of news, Polymarket CEO House was raided by the FBI and their electronics seized. We'll get into all of that price action and those headlines in just a little bit. We've also got the latest on that and a discussion on the markets and the meme coin mania coming up. Before we get into all of it though, just a reminder, friends, whatever we say here, it is not financial advice because this market is crazy risky and we don't know anything for sure. So please proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, it is Thursday. It is the 14th of November. Legendary, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, doing quite well. Still enjoying Japan a lot. It's been my first full day. I've been on a pretty long tour with a massive power bank with me, perma plugged into the iPhone, so I can check the charts. And it's actually quite helpful, continuing our overtrading discussion that we had yesterday, to just watch the numbers go up and not feeling the massive FOMO of aping in and out of things. But also at the same time, as soon as I got home, I identified a couple new memes to buy into. And I don't know, I find it honestly super helpful because it reminds me of the last cycle to have these conversations with you guys. I mean, last time we used to have them in private. Now we have them in public to kind of reassess what we're doing, how we're thinking about bet sizes, risk management, and all those things. And I do hope that, because we will do that more often, obviously, that those segments are helpful to everyone listening in. Obviously not as financial advice, but to kind of just get our thoughts on the market and do with them as everyone pleases or not.
So wait, are you saying that watching the charts is like your relaxation? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, does it sound insane?
Yeah, definitely.
It's more relaxing to watch the charts than to trade the charts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as I said, like I added for the first time ever in the over the weekend, I added an app on my phone to actually watch the price, because before that I was definitely more in the camp of, well, you're just going to put this, the money is where it is. I don't need to see it. As soon as you log into Twitter, you find out if Bitcoin's up or not anyway. So I never thought that I needed a specific app to tell me that. But as you say, now it's kind of more important. Sammy, what's your thought on this? Are you like, is it therapeutic to watch the charts? Is that how you switch off as well?
It's therapeutic if it's green charts. If the charts are dying, then yeah, that's not therapeutic at all. That's painful.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would have thought. How are you doing otherwise though? Obviously we've been chatting a lot last couple of days. How are you holding up?
Yeah, good. So after our discussion yesterday, I did set up the Elon Index. Top blasted 10K at that. I'm just going to hold that for 6 months and just see how it does. But last time I checked this morning, that was up another 36%. So it's pretty crazy that Peanut, I think at one point, was at 1.7 billion, and that's the price that I bought in at, and it's even gone up since then. So I think that, yeah, just to me, it seems like if you think it's not going to go higher, it will. So I was just like, okay, let's just deploy into the Elon Index. Let's have that thesis. Let's just set and forget for 6 months and just see where we are 6 months from now.
Okay, so definitely want to touch on the Elon Index a little bit later, which I hadn't heard anyone necessarily. Well, there was one tweet yesterday, and then I brought it up. I like that framing, and then I've seen you produce some content on it. I saw some other people produce some content on it as well. I want to talk about that. Also, you talked about how to get into a chart that is just like up only. I definitely want to have that conversation out loud as well, because we were talking about that in private overnight. So let's do that in just a little bit. Let's get everyone up to speed first, though, with the price action and the headlines, as usual, coming from the snapshot. First, Bitcoin is up 4%, over $91,000, 91.6 almost. ETH is pretty much flat, actually, almost up 1% at just dipped underneath 3.2K. Solana is up 4% at around $215. On the meme side of things, we really have a lot of things moving a lot. We have, just waiting for this to load, we have Dogecoin's up 6% to 40 cents. SHIB is up 8%. Pepe is up 76% on the listing news yesterday. Got a very interesting breakdown that Sam's going to be doing about Pepe getting listed and WIF getting listed, and Pepe is really outperforming only in terms of volume. So we've got some good numbers there to share in a little bit. WIF is also up 40% though on that news at $4.30. Bonk is up 22%, Peanut up 46%, Popcat up 34%. Trying to find something that's not up. To be honest, you can't really find anything. Muse up 30%, Mog is up 50%. There was a tweet by Coinbase yesterday, I think it was Coinbase, who asked the question, something, what rhymes with frog? Alluding to that would be the next thing that they listed. But then the first thing that I thought in my head was frog. So like there's that option. Mog is also an option. And then I think there were a couple more options. So it's not actually completely obvious.
As well.
Dog also rhymes with frog. It's a very unhelpful game to play, considering how many things actually rhyme with frog. And I'd never really thought about it before. So not very helpful in that respect. But yep, frog itself is up 20% as well to 70 cents. So a lot of green across the board. Getting into the headlines themselves, we touched on the main price action, which is the first headline. Pepe obviously listing with Robinhood and added to the roadmap for Coinbase. WIFs on the Coinbase roadmap too. As I said, Peanut hit $2 billion. Want to have a conversation a little bit later about Robinhood versus Coinbase versus Binance versus Moonshot. Like there's just a bunch more options now. Want to have that conversation out loud. And then finally, Polymarket CEO's house was raided by the FBI and electronics seized. This was a story in the New York Post where they said FBI agents raided the Manhattan apartment of Polymarket CEO Shane Copland just a week after the election. The CEO had this to say. They said it's discouraging that the current administration would seek as a last-ditch effort to go after companies they deem to be associated with political opponents. We're deeply committed to being non-partisan, and today is no different. Polymarket has provided value of tens of millions people this election cycle while causing harm to nobody. We're deeply proud of that. So quite a strong post in response to what happened in the last 24 hours. CryptoPunk, notable sale, hoodie sold for 140 ETH. I think that's the first one over 100 for quite some time. And the CryptoPunk falls actually back to 32 ETH now. So real movement on the punks side. A huge number of sales going through. That's that. Legendary, is there anything you want to add from the NFT market itself? Any quick headlines?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at the majors for the NFT market. Bored Apes are basically flat, 11.2 ETH floor for them. Pudgies are down 3.5% at a 9.35 ETH floor. Azukis are down even more. They're down 7% over the last 24 hours, 4.38 ETH floor for them. On the other hand, we have Miladies being up 6%, 5.12 ETH floor. So basically, Azukis had flipped Miladies, but only for 2 days, and Miladies are now back in a very, very strong fashion. Also, quickly on the dual side, we didn't have a chance to cover the news yesterday. We obviously set it up quickly at the top of the show. The partnership with McDonald's had pumped the price to 2.5 ETH or almost 2.5 ETH, corrected down to 2 ETH. Now it's up again, up another 10%, and it's kind of settling in the middle at 2.25 ETH. And as you also mentioned, CryptoPunks had a massive, massive sweep yesterday, pushing them over that 30 ETH floor. And that $1 million sweep that happened seemed to be done to be, or the CryptoPunks seemed to be bought up by Wintermute.
Yes, it did. That was posted by Cyrus, huge NFT trader, very good trader, very profitable trader. Pointed that out yesterday. Okay, interesting stuff. And just for a few other bits of news from around the space while we're at it, BlackRock launched their Biddle fund on Aptos, Arbitrum, Avalanche, Optimism Mainnet, and Polygon. We obviously knew this was coming, but they've kind of announced that across the board yesterday as well. Athena's staked USDE distribution this week has reached 29% APY, so really earning their just by holding the synthetic dollar. Remember, that's not literally a stable coin, it's a synthetic dollar, because there's so much more leverage in the system now as people are going long. Several crypto projects identified as meme coins due to market conditions. I thought that was a funny bit of news. Different protocols trying to get some activity to their tokens by identifying as meme coins. Elon Musk supported Dogecoin inflation as a feature, not a bug. You might not know this, but Dogecoin actually inflates all the time. There's an infinite supply with 10,000 new coins minted every minute. That's about $3,850 worth. That was reported by Decrypt yesterday. Although obviously everyone knew that already, but some people might not know and might not be interested. But Elon Musk said, I think that the flat inflation of Dogecoin, which means decreasing percentage inflation, is a feature, not a bug. In some other news, Solana NFT marketplace Tensor teases a new trading platform called Vector. That looks pretty interesting. CryptoPunk see huge volume day again. As I said, the floor moved to 32.88 ETH. And the indicator that we are always keeping a lookout for, top 5 finance apps on Apple App Store are all crypto apps now. You've got Coinbase, you've got Robinhood, Crypto.com, PayPal, and Cash App. So obviously some of those you can do other things as well. Also but they do all have a crypto component. Legendary, that is the Web3 roundup. Before we get into the main discussion today, anything catching your attention from the other bits of news?
Yeah, absolutely. On the download charts, I'm wondering if, because we talked about indicators, Sammy had that excellent segment on the show yesterday, I think it was, or no, the day before actually. And I was thinking, is this still the indicator that will be the top signal if Coinbase is in number one, or is that not the immediate top signal this time? Could this be more of a lagging indicator? And are we actually getting to a position where we're seeing kind of an everything bull? Sammy also in the private chat had mentioned the OpenSea token, where apparently the rumors around that, or not the rumors, because there is like an rewards and experience section in the revamped OpenSea to be launched in December, but there's been more pointing to actual token details being announced soon, and the retroactive component of that could spark more interest in NFTs. Again, definitely reflected in the corresponding NFTs, the Genesis ones, to be bought again. So I'm wondering, with all that interest coming in from all sides and also reviving old narratives, if seeing Coinbase hitting number one in the overall app store isn't like the immediate top signal, but still could be one, but maybe a bit more lagging.
Look, I like the thinking, but I saw a take by Frank yesterday, which I liked a little more, because I do think history repeats, but it doesn't repeat precisely. It more likely rhymes. He said it won't be the Coinbase that has to be the top for it to be a top. It will be Phantom Wallet. And I feel like that's so much more accurate for this specific type of cycle. It's like, yes, it's the kind of thing that you need to download in order to participate, but that is where people will likely go. So either Phantom, maybe Moonshot, those types of apps. And that's the conversation I want to have a little later as part of this conversation. Where
I actually disagree. I think so that you got this wallet idea, and I think that's a good proxy for retail. But I think the structure of the market's changed, and I think we're heavily focused now on institutions and that kind of buying pressure. So I think the liquidity is probably, the global liquidity is a better indicator. And I think so M2 money supply and Lynn Alden and Rao Powell are big advocates of this. Like ultimately, when that starts to top and come back down, there's like a 3-month lag. So when people have like an economic decision to make, it takes them roughly 3 months based on this indicator in terms of correlation for them to deploy that capital. And I think because there's so much institutional capital in this ecosystem now, that is a far better indicator of a top signal, because if that keeps going up, there's liquidity everywhere. That's going to get deployed into assets that are seen to be superior. And I think Bitcoin is that leading asset at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely like watching that number as well. Legendary is going to be speaking to some of the thoughts on how that might flow to Bitcoin in a little bit as part of the next discussion. Maybe before we get into the main headlines today, which is, we've got the Bitcoin conversation, just how things are going with majors. You've got, and linked to that, the strategic reserve stuff, because there was a bit of chatter about that yesterday. We've got the Pepe listings, the WIF listing, and how the whole centralized exchanges are playing into the narratives now and how people are quite scared to sell. Then you've got the poly market stuff at the end. Legendary, just a quick roundup of how things are going for you in the trenches, trading around. We had a good conversation on this yesterday. How are you thinking about things today?
It's going to sound delusional, but it sounds delusional, but provide some reasoning for that. I removed take profit orders for things where I made a nice profit, like Peanut. That was actually Funky who inspired me to do that, who said, it could very well run to 20 billion. I mean, 20 billion is a very high number. I don't necessarily think it's going to do that, but I've been, taking profits at 1 bill, at 1.5, at 2 bill, at 2.4. And then I was like, fuck it, what am I doing here? I took a very, very decent amount of profits from that. And if it went to zero like this tomorrow, I'd still be very happy. So I'm like, I'm just going to leave everything in for at least a month. Or if it hits the crazy number, if it hits 10 bill or something like that, then I'm going to take another sizable chunk out of that. And I've been approaching other plays as well. I told you I've been trading Luce in and out. I sold at 300 mil. It dipped today to 210. I think it's back up to 240 or something like that. I traded in and out of that. And I'm like, fuck it. I might going to do the swing trades as well with a smaller portion of that. But I'm very happy to hold the things that I have conviction in, just that, tip higher and see more tokens potentially running to $1 billion, especially those where I already made good profits and where I don't feel like I need to extract more and more and to like gradually scale out of them, because I think this is not the time for me, at least, to gradually, scale out of them. And obviously, I hold a significant Luce position. I'm talking my own backs here, so I definitely want everyone to be aware of that when I'm saying I think it's going to go to $1 billion. That is my own backs, and I'm talking, and I'm severely biased to that. But my general thinking has been to just be a bit more ambitious with take profits on the higher end of things, and with new buys to essentially scale out quicker for the part where I take the initials out. So just to basically free ride a larger chunk of my new trades.
Okay, two things on this. One is a personal observation on how we've been talking recently, which I think people will either find funny or absurd. And then the second is like a follow-up question. The first observation is when these coins are getting into that 100 mil market cap or 200 or 300 market cap, when we're talking about where things go, it just seems to be like our conclusion is, well, could go to $1 billion. Like it's becoming more and more normal as part of our conversation and as part of the thinking to say, well, if something else is at $1 billion, then why not this one? And I've just noticed that more than ever right now. Whereas I think if you asked me 4 weeks ago where some of these 100 mil market cap coins were going to go, I would not have been holding them for dear life because I thought that they were all going to go up. But as a consequence of the things that have been happening over the last few weeks, I'm way more inclined to, when things reach 250, 250, 300, to start to think, well, it's got enough strength to get here now, and it's been hovering around here for now. You just feel like it's not going to go down, which obviously is a risky like position to take. But I feel like the tides has just shifted a little bit in that respect. Legendary, do you have any reflections on that? Because I feel like we've both been in that camp now.
Yeah, do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of you saying there is no NFTs that exist between 10 and 20 ETH. It's either above 20 or under 10.
I was right. Well, I wasn't literally right, but I was talking about Pudgy Penguins, right? When it got to like 16 ETH.
No, I mean, you talked in general and you're still right. Like apes are at 11 and punks are at 30 and nothing else is in between that essentially. And Pudgies aren't in that 15, 17, 18 bracket anymore. They basically lost it, right?
Yeah.
And I've been thinking, it's kind of like you're saying that, right? If a meme with a good and active narrative volume, etc., all those things still have to play out, obviously, as a 250 or 300 mil, and this trend continues, why shouldn't it go higher? And if the precedent has been set, remember Ovi posting in April this year that he doesn't think that another meme coin is going to go to $1 billion in this cycle. And we had Goat, we had obviously Peanut going to 2 bill on Solana specifically, I think was the point he was making. The more often that happens, basically, the more normalized it becomes and the more willing to think that it will repeat itself more often as this as long as this cycle continues, as long as this trend goes on. So with that being said, you also have the advantage with the fungibles that you don't have with the non-fungibles, that you can take profits on the way to those 250 mil, 100 mil, and then just, if you have that risk tolerance, free ride more and see what happens.
Sure. Okay, I want to ask you one follow-up question, Sam, then I want to come to you on this Elon Index that we've been speaking about, and that you, I don't know if we literally created it yesterday, but I saw a few other people talk about it and then you visualized it. Legendary, you mentioned that one of the things you're doing now, because you've made profit, you're kind of taking the rest of the sell orders out, because you're like, well, I might as well just free ride the rest, and I want to keep all of the upside without capping it. What would you do if you, so you're in the positive position of needing, of having already made that significant profit, right? Like, and that feels great. It's nothing better than when you're in like the strong position, you buy in, you're already up, and you feel just far more confident from that position. There'll be some people looking at the market now, getting in now, not as, not up already. How would you approach the rises if you haven't already banked anything? What did you do? So that was more of a structured approach out, right?
Yeah, I do one of two things. The one thing that, for example, people like Moritz, also very good trader, are doing is Moritz is picking out conviction plays, goes in with size with them. He picked Mog, he picked Mumu, the bull. And then when he's up, I mean, he's not selling now, at least from what I could tell, but when he's up 50% in a couple days, that's already a massive enough win to basically book, if you want to book that, or at least take your initials out. Like, whatever the amount is, if you go in with, 5 sol, for example, and that's a big bet for you, and it goes to 7.5 sol, and you take out initials, you maybe take out a bit more profit, take out 6 sol, you free ride 1.5 sol, and you made a 20% gain on the 5 sol that is already realized because you have it in sol, and you can do 2-3 sol plays or whatever. So basically take profits on those mid cap or large cap memes, quote unquote, after bigger swing, and then use that to trade more, or to hold other conviction or extend other conviction plays, not to overtrade, obviously. And the other one is, if you feel connected with the trenches and you want to go for the very low liquidity bets, obviously running the risk to basically break your bankroll, you can get the 0.1, 0.2 sol bets in and go for like quick 5 to 10 X's. But I feel like this is maybe the more difficult thing to do right now, because I feel like a lot of people are talking about those mid-sized plays and the Mog beta play after the listings that we saw with Pepe and other memes, and Mog being up, what was it, 50%, I think you said, was quite an easy trade to be had. And also the same with timing buys. With Luce, again, I said I bought it at 200, it went to 300, it dipped, now it's back to 250. If you see the volume that's happening there, I think those are rather easy dips to buy. And definitely, again, I think Luce goes higher, you can just top blast it, but if you're not in a you should never top blast without a reason, basically. Even I top blasted a bit of 300 mil more, and that was not the most not the smartest thing. I think waiting for those entry positions. And there might be this one runner that you're going to miss. There might be this runner that goes, Peanut is that. No, even Peanut retraced, but Peanut didn't retrace from 1 billion to 2 billion. Like, if once it hit 1 billion, you were like, oh, I'm going to buy it 700 mil when it dips 30% to get back to 1 billion. You never had that chance. And you're going to be okay with that. There's like enough plays happening every day that you don't need to try to chase the one runner that you missed because it went up only.
Okay, interesting stuff. I'll give some thoughts as well after this, but Sam, I want to go to you on the Elon Index that we created yesterday after seeing some chatter. Kind of realized over the past 24 hours that some of the best performers were just Elon related plays, whether it's a squirrel, whether it's the Department of Efficiency, whether it's his pet hamster. Do you want to go through your index that you created and what you did yesterday? I thought it was kind of a fun experiment.
Yeah, so I think, so the Elon Index, I think there's 6 tokens that are kind of within that, and Doge is the OG Doge is probably the main one from 2021 or even earlier. Department of Government Efficiency, you've got Banana, which is another small cap, so he put a banana on a rocket for scale. And then he's put what the other ones, Peanuts, Shog, what's the hedgehog called?
Shrub.
And then there's another one as well, Grok. But again, there's various nuances. So the Elon Index I pulled together, you've got Grok on multiple chains, you've got Doge on multiple chains, as in Department of Government Efficiency. So in terms of actually selecting which ones you go for and the sizing you go for is incredibly arbitrary. I just went with something that felt right. And I wanted to have the heavier weighting in those probably more reliable, bigger market cap coins that hopefully won't move as much. And one of those is Doge. I think I put like 25% in Doge, 22.5% in Peanut, 22.5% in Doge, the other Doge, sorry. So I think it's just applying the weightings and then just getting an idea of what you feel comfortable with, and then allocating, look at your time horizon. So I think that the rationale behind this and the reason why I just allocated 10K to it was because, okay, well, I wanted to have form an actual thesis about meme coins, because I find with the trenches, what I end up doing is FOMOing into something, trying to time the top, trying to time the bottom. I'm just like, you know what, I have this thesis, 6 months, I think it's going to do well. Like, we're coming into an administration that could potentially transform the crypto landscape. I think everything's going higher, so I'll just top blast it at the current prices and just track it. And I think that I'm not going to sell it for 6 months. I think a 6 month time horizon makes sense, which is consistent with Moritz. I think he's doing a 6 month time horizon with Mumu and Mog. And I think it just gives it time to potentially go higher. If this is going to be a meme coin super cycle, I do think that it's going to be higher than where it is today. And I think it probably will outperform the returns in the majors for kind of a reasonable risk return. And I think the weighting that I've given for each one kind of offsets each other. Like, one might pump, but the other one might retrace if attention's given to one, especially with the low caps. I think that Grok on Solana is a lot lower, so I allocated a smaller amount to that, but that's actually done relatively well compared to some of the others, and that's kind of supported that return. I think I put 10K in. So when I checked this morning, it's about 13.5K. So it's returning well, but I fully expect that to retrace as well. Like, it's like very attention based. It's dependent on Elon, but I think in the medium term, it's probably going to mean revert to kind of going up over time. So to me, it's an interesting experiment. I've allocated a small portion of my bags to that. We'll see how that performs, and then I'll just update as it goes. It's a thesis, and it's similar with other investment thesis, like FWOG. I like the artist. Like, I've invested in him back in early October. I actually bought more yesterday at the 700 mil or 650 mil market cap that it is, which is pretty wild. But given the current circumstances, I do think that seeing Pepe go to 10 bill on that listing, it just kind of reframing that mind of where these coins could go to, having a thesis and just kind of backing yourself. And I think you can put any amount of capital behind, whether you've only got a few SOL or a lot of SOL. I think that is probably the reasoning behind why I'm doing this, because typically I'd be a lot more risk averse, probably more structured, big in the airdrop farming kind of landscape, but less so in the fully speculative landscape.
I like it. I've got this chart showing for the people who are watching in. Remember, we're live on video as well on YouTube and on X video too. So yeah, you've got like the dark blue amounts represent the seed amount, how much you put into each token, and then the light blue amounts are surpassing the dark blue amounts because the spot value has increased already. So 36% rise across the spectrum of Elon tokens at the moment. Very interesting stuff. One of the things I wanted to come back to you on, because I have some thoughts on this as well, then we'll get into the main headlines, is you mentioned FWOG, for example, and I was having this conversation with, I can't remember in which chat it was the other day, and I was calling FWOG undervalued, for example. It's like FWOG was at 500 at the time. And like there's obviously something comical about calling a $500 million FWOG token undervalued. But when you looked at, this was my perspective, when you look at the amount of attention it gets, the amount of mind share it's captured, the amount of people who are kind of creating organic content around it, and you compare that with the other things, and I think that's what you mentioned there, if WIF is going to be at whatever valuation that is at, if Pepe is going to be at whatever valuation that is at, and we'll actually discuss those more in detail when we talk about those listings, then Frog just starts to look very, very undervalued. And I think taking the headline number in isolation will make you sound crazy, because it is crazy. But when you start to evaluate this stuff on a relative basis, then you can start to get a sense of, right, this is actually undervalued versus the other stuff. So for example, even yesterday, Shrub at 100 mil as Elon's pet hedgehog is probably undervalued versus the Frog at 500 mil, but it's got this big community, blah, 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 but it's not to do with Elon, for example. So it's like you can kind of feel things out by doing those comparisons. That's one of my reflections there.
And I think I'd agree with that. And I think attention is the biggest thing here. And something that Ledge frequently shows is the Kaito mindshare. So when we look at those, the mindshare by meme coin, that to me is super interesting, because often, I mean, it might be a slightly lagging indicator, but at least you have a visual representation of maybe some that have dropped off that could potentially pop again, that have had that mindshare previously. And I think ultimately that's how I would then kind of work out, okay, is this under or overvalued based on the mindshare for the other tokens like Pepe or WIF, or some of the other ones like GOAT.
Like it. Okay. Interesting conversation. We might have to come back to this more as the cycle continues, or certainly as the mania kind of continues, because I think it's helpful to have that conversation. But look, there's a lot of other important news as well, which is linked to all of this stuff. So let's get into the Bitcoin all-time high first. I think we broke 93K yesterday, and we've got some interesting other bits of news around Bitcoin, some rumors as well. So Legendary, do you want to take this?
Absolutely, yeah. Bitcoin is at all-time high, and I feel it doesn't get the attention it deserves on the timeline, because so many people are just focused on memes and seeing it as a Solana cycle and Solana rally. And obviously Solana is up relatively more, but still BTC is at all-time high and is seeing some insane numbers. If we look at some of the CoinGlass data that I'm sharing on screen, we see derivatives volume being up another 34% at almost $200 billion. If we look at the liquidation numbers, we also see something interesting. We see the $250 million of capital have been liquidated over the last 24 hours. And that's both longs and shorts, because there's still a good amount of volatility going in, and people are betting both ways. We had 110 million liquidated in longs. We had 140 million liquidated in shorts. So obviously you have this insane volume. You have people who are giga bullish and saying this is just the start. We had this very, for me, notable memo by Bernstein Capital, very large asset manager, which said, just buy Bitcoin, essentially. This is the time to do it, and do it ASAP. And then you have people who are like, oh, it has run so much, you have to short now, it has to correct. And both are kind of right, because we see the volatility. So it's interesting to me to observe these liquidation numbers. A quick look on the ETF side of things. Volume is looking very insane there. If we look at, where is it? If you look at the USD net inflows over the last couple of days, we have 500 mil, 800 mil, 1.1 bill, 300 mil, 1.36 bill. So those numbers are unchanged and are very, very strong numbers. And then we have an interesting point that is being made by different prominent traders and figures across the timeline that is sharing the sentiment of basically the US needing to act quickly if they want to do the strategic Bitcoin reserve, because the entire market is front running then. We have Zero Hedge saying Bitcoin would reach 500K if the reserve happens. If the reserve happens, also as a second order effect, that other nations would also have to do their own Bitcoin reserve as well. We have David Bailey mentioning exactly this front running point that I shared before, that because everyone else is buying Bitcoin, the US actually needs to make it an issue of national security if they want to buy and do it fast, because otherwise they're just going to be either exit liquidity for others who will get a way, way higher price. And then circling back to the inflows, Pump provided a very good cumulative view at that, sharing that BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF has hit $40 billion in assets under management faster than any other ETF in history. This type of dominance is hard to ignore. And it's interesting to look at that metric, because on the show we've been speaking about adoption in terms of the typical metric that we look at is users, and how long did it take an app to get 1 billion users? How long did it take a chain to get 1 billion TVL? And that metric can also be translated into the TradFi world, and seeing that this $40 billion mark has never been hit that fast in an ETF, and that this is, even in the TradFi world, the asset that is the highest in demand in the shortest time frame possible, is sending a very, very strong signal to the market, in my opinion.
Love it. Got to go straight to resident Bitcoin expert Funky for your take here. What are your thoughts on some of this data that Legendary just shared? Welcome to the stage, my friend. You are on mute at the moment. You are still on mute.
Oh, sorry, gang. I'm at the gym. So I just want to chime in because it's getting to the point where it's interesting, where family, who I've told for years to buy Bitcoin, started blowing me up. They would always text me when Bitcoin had a big drop. They're like, "Are you okay?" And I'd always send them the meme of when Bitcoin crashes 50%, with the dude with a neck brace in the hospital. And then it shows the next frame, him smiling, says, "But you bought Bitcoin before 2021. So my brother, my youngest brother, owns no Bitcoin. And I've been telling him since the election, you better just start DCing, get some kind of exposure. And he didn't. I sent him a picture of yesterday when it broke 91, and he just wrote back, "Fuck." I said, "Greg, this is still cheap on all timelines. This is going to go to millions in years. Just start buying. Don't worry about the volatility." And then my niece, who bought a tenth of a Bitcoin in the bear market, she said to me, "What should I do?" I said, "Don't you ever dare sell your Bitcoin. We're going to put that in a cold wallet." So it's interesting now. Family are coming back around and they're getting curious. But I think it's here to stay. Like Legendary was saying with the demand, it's just crazy.
Love it. Appreciate the anecdotes, Funky. One quick reflection on that, and then Sam, I think you have a question and a comment as well. What are you guys doing when it comes? So it's funny, when a lot of crypto native people you would assume are holding Bitcoin, and I don't know, I've had a couple of conversations with people recently, or I've heard people speaking on this, and I've heard a lot of people's plans are to do the cycle as they are, whether it's betting on Solana, or betting on memes and doing all that stuff, and then go to Bitcoin at the end. Personally, I don't know, this is just, I'd never even entertained the idea. I'm a holder of Bitcoin. I like Bitcoin. I think it is one of the things you want to set and forget, but I can see how if you want to increase the amount of capital quickly, you might think, right, let me go do that first and come back after. Do you guys have a view on that? Like, what's your strategy here? Sam, maybe go to you.
It kind of ties into my question as well. So I've been monitoring this, like the Bitcoin dominance, for some time, and it's literally been up only. And I do wonder whether, and this feeds into that global liquidity question, like where will that liquidity flow? Will it flow into the rest of the crypto ecosystem, or will it literally be like a Bitcoin dominance chart that goes significantly higher? And that does have me a little bit concerned. Like, am I underexposed to Bitcoin compared to these other assets that I'm playing with daily? And to your point around, like, do you just hold Bitcoin now rather than actually trying to make it and then taking profits into Bitcoin? Like, it's a very hard question to answer, and that's something that I'm struggling with. And that's the question I had to Legendary or Funky. Like, I know we try and have exposure to everything, but is Bitcoin going to be the dominant asset if it becomes a strategic reserve? And will that capital actually flow to these other crypto assets at some point? We've had alt seasons in the past, but I just don't know whether it's going to follow the same kind of flows this time around.
I'll take that with my view, and then we'll have to get to the next topic as well, because it's very important. Come back to you for the listings for Pepe and WIF. I think the key thing to think about when you're asking that question, like when you're going to be playing around in other assets, and this is why I hold Bitcoin, is, okay, fine, you're going to go off and make money in other ways, which is fine. But when you come back for Bitcoin at the end of the cycle, Bitcoin's not going to be at this price. So you're going to need to make like a significant premium in dollars in order to get the same amount of Bitcoin. That's why I'd always be cautious of just that strategy where you might go off, you might make a bunch of money, but then you come back and it's like, okay, well, versus Bitcoin, if the dominance hasn't been had any impact on, and Bitcoin's just moved up in line with all of your gains, then that's one of the things I'd be concerned about. Legendary, I don't know if you have a view on that.
Well, that's the thing. Like the 500k that Novogratz is throwing around, that's like a 5.5x from where we are today, and that's a pretty substantial return just to put it into Bitcoin and walk away. Like I think the hassle of trying to make that in the trenches with the ups and downs is it's stressful.
Yeah, I completely agree. Look, it's an interesting conversation to have. I think people are going about things differently, so hopefully that was interesting to people. I definitely lean towards locking some up, not going for it and using other stuff to play around. Some people, I guess, maybe slightly further down the risk curve, want to increase the amount of Bitcoin they'll be able to have by earning more ASAP. So different ways to go about things. Let's get into the second headline though, because it's very, very important for what's happening, as well as looking forward to how things might continue to play out, because you can see this being something people are very, very interested in. We've got the Pepe listing with Robinhood. It was also added to the Coinbase roadmap. WIF was also on Coinbase too. Peanut separately hit 2 billion after its Binance listing. Sam, you're going to just give us a quick breakdown of what happened here, how things reacted, and what this means moving forward for these coins that are looking for listings.
Yeah, so Pepe was listed on Robinhood and added to the roadmap for Coinbase. WIF was on Coinbase roadmap too. I think that this is an interesting one because there's been so much controversy over listing fees and will Coinbase actually catch up? And I think this regulatory clarity or the direction that we're going, like, okay, well, it's probably time to start listing these other ones and actually competing. So I think looking at the history of like Binance and how it ended up flipping Coinbase in terms of a global, on a global scale of being that number one kind of exchange was because they were listing all these more exotic coins. So it just appealed to a wider range of users. And you can see that in the numbers, like the estimated registered users for Coinbase about 110 million, Binance is 150, but the monthly active users are substantially more. I think they're about 3x more on Binance. But Coinbase does have that dominance in the US. So I think that to me, they both have their own sort of pros and cons. And I think both of those exchanges are still the leading, but I do think Robinhood has that historical retail friendly or retail focus with like the GME stuff that happened back with Roaring Kitty,
Sure.
that kind of the battle against the hedge funds. So even like the listing on Robinhood, it's significant, but I just don't think it's as big as like the likes of Binance or Coinbase.
Sure.
There's new exchanges coming through like Moonshot. I think there's less than 5 million, and the monthly active users vary, but it's an alternative to these traditional exchanges. I do think that like a listing on Coinbase, it adds credibility and has those like that regulatory backing just because of their ethos. I think from a Binance perspective, having that like the global liquidity is huge, like hugely important. And yeah, I think like that they each have their own merits. I do think that this could be, well, it is becoming like a gateway to other coins being listed, and I think that is setting a precedent that is probably why a lot of these meme coins are beginning to run, and people are looking for those sort of 10 to 50, or even now it's probably like 100 to 500 range that could potentially be listed on these exchanges for that almost like 10x. Like you look at Pepe, I think it blew past 10 billion, and just reframing that mindset as to like what is possible when it does hit these exchanges. Because like you look at Mudeng, was it last month it got listed on the Binance Perps. It had a little bit of a pump, but it's now back at the 400 mil range. So it's not quite like where, like, I don't know, FWOG has gone, and that's like 700 mil. So it's just interesting to see that and what the potential for a listing can do to a coin.
Yeah, definite demand for the meme coins on these exchanges. Follow-up question, can we just give the breakdown? You mentioned Pepe's gone through 10 bill. Do we have the numbers? I think we tweeted it earlier, maybe Legendary did, on how much more volume Pepe was doing compared to WIF, for example. Do we have those numbers, Sam? Is that you? Okay. I'll read this out then. So Bonk guy said he mixed up the Pepe and WIF volume by mistake. We're showing this tweet on the screen if you're watching in with us. The correct numbers. So Bonk did 447 million, WIF did 20 million, and Pepe did 259 million yesterday. My point is that Bonk has more. Okay, so this is a point about Bonk. But interesting to see there that Pepe is, of the two that were just listed yesterday, Pepe did significantly more volume. Legendary, question for you. Do you think this is, is this is there a mimetic reason for this? Or is it like, this is the smaller number? I want to feel richer and buy the smaller number, because WIF is obviously in the dollars, whereas Pepe, there's still like 5 zeros after the decimal point. What do you think?
I think just Pepe being probably also the larger meme coin and the one with more history is the one to create more volume. I don't have the numbers for Peanut and Act for the two Binance listings. I obviously know that Act is up more, relatively speaking, than Peanut, but I'd highly suspect that the Peanut volume is significantly higher than the one on Act. Again, I don't have the numbers. I could be wrong, but I'd be very much surprised if I were wrong on that.
Okay, big question for you from a personal perspective then. I was turning this in my head over yesterday and I didn't know what the answer was. Pep, like you've got these kind of high caps now, like WIF and Pepe, that are listed already, that seem to be doing great once they've been listed. You've got these mid caps in between that we were kind of talking about with Luce and the Department of Government Efficiency and other ones like that, where you're kind of hoping to get to the billion. What do you prefer here? Because I've got a bit of Pepe, I've got a bit of a couple of the others, as we mentioned. Do the winners keep winning as significantly? Because Pepe was outperforming everyone else yesterday still. How do you think about the difference between the high caps and the mids here?
I'm more interested in the mid caps. I think that is one of our favorite topics. It depends of where you are financially, what you want to achieve, and then what your risk preference is as a result of that. I've been thinking about, do I rotate mid cap profits into the large cap memes? Do I rotate my Luce into Pepe? But I'm like, no.
I literally started thinking
I
that
don't want to stay. Yeah, I don't want to do that. What I do instead is I rotate profits, or part of the profits, I rotate them into Bitcoin. I use CBTC on Solana because it's so convenient. And then like every couple of days, or when there's enough when enough Bitcoin accumulated, I move it away on my basically cold storage, because I want to take some chips off the mimetic table. And I feel like that combination of mid caps plus the absolute shitters has been working very well for me. I don't need to chase those extra like 40-50% in the large caps as well. I'd rather get those 40 or 50% maybe with a different time frame from Bitcoin than from Pepe right now.
I like it. Very interesting. One of the final questions, I don't know if we'll get to the Polymarket headline. I think it's less significant than these ones for today. Sam, you shared this summary table in our private document. I'm going to read this out on the number of users from each exchange, and the estimated registered users. So Coinbase have monthly active users around 8 mil. Binance have 30 mil. Robinhood have 11 mil. And we've just got Moonshot on that table as well. I think significantly lower because it's it's relatively new. What are we thinking here in terms of indicators? Like one of the things that's definitely happened is now there's an element of fear. I think Bold Leonidas did a funny comic image of this, where everyone is scared to sell anything now because they will feel so terrible if it was to get listed by anyone. But do we still think which order of exchanges should be prioritized here? Is there a specific order? Because there was a point in time even Moonshot was completely mooning things. Sam, what's your perspective?
Well, I think the reason why things were being mooned on Moonshot was because they weren't necessarily getting the Binance and Coinbase listings, so that people were seeing that as the liquidity event.
And were they much lower as well? They were much were they lower cap stuff?
Yeah, it would have been low. I'm assuming, I have without checking, but I'm assuming they're probably sub 100 listings. But I don't know. Like, I mean, I think the landscape's changed slightly in the past week or so, let alone like past month. And like I would have historically been like, it's got to be a Binance listing. But I think recently, because of the US win with the presidential election, like I just think even a Coinbase listing could become like a lot more powerful as well. And I think for me, that Pepe above 10 bill, like that's just an indicator of what's to come. So yeah, it's hard to say. I think, to be honest, they've got their own merits. And I think that in a US like dominated place, like Coinbase is the one, but Binance just has that global liquidity. So I think either or a primary. Robinhood, like, I don't know, like the Solana thing, I don't know if you saw that about Solana being forced sold and then re-added at a significantly higher price. Like I think that just the PTSD of what happened, was it last year or the year? Yeah, 2022. I just think that's left a bit of a foul taste. So I just don't think it has the same weighting. But maybe users would, like new users to that platform might buy it, buy the listings, but it's just not, I don't think it has the same weight.
Fair. Interesting. Final thought on this. One of the things I think is definitely true, although we need to check these numbers and maybe we need to do this after the show. Like, yes, we've compared volume between memes that have already been listed and been like, okay, well, Pepe seems to be doing more volume than WIF, and therefore, I don't know, try and draw some conclusion to that. I think the more interesting thing moving forward to consider is Pepe versus Portal, or something else, or like Peanut versus Portal, two coins listed on Binance, one being a gaming token, one being a different type of token, one being a meme token. Ultimately, the centralized exchange's business model relies on attracting people to trade, trying to attract volume. And if it keeps being the case that these memes get listed and there is significant volume, which it seems to be that there will be, then I think it's a reasonable bet to make, which I think is the bet that the market is making, buying and holding memes in the hope that, so there's like a double hope that's happening at the moment. A, can this number just go up in and of itself because we're going into this crazy super cycle style thing, and we're hoping, you know, the 200s will go to a bill, the bills will go to 3 to 5 bill. And in addition to that, or as part of that process, can you get us a listing which will send us to the moon as well? So there's like a double hope.
But just I think we also need to be careful though on the volume point around like what's artificial and what's organic. If you've got market makers that are being paid to make certain coins, then comparison between those coins might not necessarily be reflective of what the actual like interest in that particular coin is. So I think that if we're able to do that, it becomes very difficult. But I think that might be another point just worth noting. Sorry, Ledge, I think you were about to say something.
I think that's a great point. Ledge, do you want to close us off here?
Yeah, it's a beautiful caveat for what I want to say, which is exactly to compare those two tokens that you mentioned on 24-hour volume, because the difference is so beautiful between the two of them. We have Portal coming in at 51 mil. We have Peanut coming in at a 100x of that at $5 billion in volume over the last 24 hours.
Wow. Is it possible to see what Portal did when it was just listed? Or you can't track that immediately?
It is possible to do that, but I can't do that with the remaining time that we have in the show right now.
Fair enough. I think that'll be an interesting thing to see, because I think ultimately people are looking for things that attract volume, things that attract attention plus volume. But I take your point, Sam. Like I think that there are all kinds of games that people play at the beginning, especially to make sure that there is volume. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But guys, that is the end of today's show. Hope it was enjoyable. As always, remember we do this every single day, Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour live on X video, YouTube video, and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We will be back again tomorrow to close the week. Hope you have a wonderful day with your tokens, no matter what they are. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.